Hey, YouTube. Let's do this.
Back to nature, climbing higher. Woods are thick, hiking alone. Hear a tree crack, loud as gunfire. Stops you cold, chill to the bone. Hear the crowding, turn to howling. Something's prowling, just out of sight. Beast in the night. Beast in the night. The forest has fallen silent. The mountain's dark. The moon is full. Catch the black shape of a giant, 8 feet tall, unbelievable. Your heart is pounding, huge steps are bounding. Your hope is drowning in the fading light. Beast in the night. Beast in the night. Oh, hell yeah. Run for your life. Step it up. Your fear is growing, red eyes are glowing. You might die knowing those folks were right. Beast in the night. Beast in the night. Beast in the
And hey, everybody. Welcome to Squatch Talk. I'm Pat. How's everybody doing tonight? Thanks for being here. Appreciate each and every single one of you, as always and forever, no matter how long the channel lasts or not. So tonight, a show I'm really excited about, actually. A show that has been sort of swimming in my mind for at least a few months. Was never able to pull the trigger on it, but finally we're here, man. And so I'm just gonna go with it. There's one lighting issue I need to fix, but I'm gonna go ahead and just bring our guest in tonight, man. We've got Mr. Matt Crowley, who is he's a Bigfoot skeptic, amongst other things, entertainer, a performer, and most notably, Patrick Stewart's actual stunt double on Star Trek: The Next Generation. How you doing tonight, Matt?
I'm good.
That so that last one wasn't true. the the
Let's start
stunt double
somewhere.
part. Yes. Like we all could wish, right? So what's up, Matt? How you doing, man? Welcome to the show. I'm so glad to have you here, man. You are you're following in the footsteps of some greats. I'll just say.
Well, it's very flattering. Do
Yes.
you know who Michael Dennett was?
Yes. Yep.
Very good. A lot of people don't. It's he died in something like 2011, and I was lucky enough to meet him. So I live in Seattle. He lived in Federal Way, which is I don't know 30 miles south of here, kind of between here and Tacoma. And I started doing these investigations with the dermal ridge stuff, and my investigations came into his attention, and so I met him. I got to hang out with him on a couple of occasions,
Mm-hmm.
and he had written articles for. He wrote at least one article for Skeptical Inquirer that I know of. There used to be a sister publication called Skeptical Briefs, and he wrote up some of my dermal ridge stuff in Skeptical Briefs, and Skeptical Briefs is no longer in publication, but I somehow think that I've inherited the mantle of Michael Dennett, but my investigations were in a very different direction than his.
Sure. Well, let me ask you, Matt. I mean, let's kind of let's walk into that a little bit. What got you interested in the Bigfoot dermal ridge discussion, or like how much Bigfoot anything had you even been like interested in or following? Like what kind of led to all that?
Well, I was quite fascinated as a child. I ask a lot of these people, and they were interested in childhood. So I'm 61. My mother had told me about it. She used to read things like Fate magazine, and she had some old issues of like Argosy and Saga, which are men's magazines, but I think she was reading them for the mysterious content. They would have articles by people like Ivan Sanderson. And so she knew about this stuff. And I was given a copy of John Green's On the Track of the Sasquatch when I was 9. And I read it and I thought, well, this is amazing. And I was completely convinced of the argument when I was 9 years old, right? And
Right.
at the time, I was a little bit surprised because I thought, well, this is the coolest thing ever. This is amazing. Why isn't everybody infatuated with this subject? And most of my little friends had no interest and were just interested in other things. And so I just kind of soldiered on for a number of years there until about the mid 70s. And by the mid 70s, I kind of stopped hearing about Bigfoot. I stopped seeing programs on TV. I guess there were some. I guess the $6 Million Man fought Bigfoot. I never saw that I remember, but that of course is obvious fiction. But as far as the real stuff, and so I just by the mid 70s I became interested in other things, rock and roll music and picking locks and making hot air balloons, other stuff, right? So and I was actually kind of angry by the mid 70s because I was kind of angry that they hadn't found Bigfoot. Right. So like, it must be a big waste of time. It's a bunch of foolishness. They'll never find Bigfoot, So then years went by. And in about 2000, I saw a very early video on the internet. And even in 2000, the internet was very different. There was no YouTube. So this was a video on the internet. It was unusual. And it was about the Skookum expedition. And they were saying very promotional things like, oh, well, they found amazing evidence. They found this imprint of what they believed to be a full body impression, right? And I thought, well, that's pretty interesting, right? This is pretty interesting. And then eventually I found Bigfoot forums. And regardless of whether you were an advocate or a skeptic, it was a place to talk about an esoteric subject. And that's one of the beauties of the internet, is that if you have an interest in some unusual offbeat subject, there's always people around who have the same offbeat interest, right? Maybe you're interested in collecting clothespins like Ben Radford. Well, there's going to be somebody else who has the same fascination. So I thought, well, this is amazing, right? And here's what's a little bit embarrassing about the dermal ridges, because I don't remember specifically. A couple of the historical elements I've forgotten, but I did get my hands on a DVD copy of Legend Meets Science, right? It was one of
Right.
these Doug Hychek
Doug Hychek, and
productions.
yeah, everybody in the Bigfoot world's very familiar with Legend Meets Science. So
Yeah.
yeah,
And
you're referencing something known. Yeah.
okay, very good. So they had a segment featuring Jimmy Chilcutt, right? I'm like,
Yeah.
who's this guy? Oh, okay, he's this fingerprint expert, and the reference wasn't really strong. It was just like a couple of frames where they flashed this texture on a cast, and Jimmy Chilcutt famously said they're dermal ridges, fingerprints, except on a foot, and he went so far as to say, I kid you not, he said, I stake my reputation on it. So I'm like, wow, that's amazing. Now here's where I forget kind of some of the steps. But I at first had an idea, well, how do I know these things don't occur from, like, you make a cast in dirt and you pull it out of the dirt, and then, well, you got to clean it, right? There's always adhered soil to a cast. Well, maybe these dermal ridges are people taking toothbrushes, right? And I tried it myself. I made a cast in my basement, and I'm like, no, that's not it. That looks nothing like the image seen on Legend Meets Science. And I just had a variety of intuitions about what it might have been. And I met up with Rick Knoll. So I live in Seattle. Knoll lives up in Edmonds. And we were both visiting a museum in Seattle called the Seattle Museum of the Mysteries. It specialized in unusual, offbeat kind of stuff. And so I think I met him there. And so Noel gave me a copy of the cast that Jimmy Chilcutt was investigating. Now, a couple of years after that, I learned that cast actually had a name. On the top surface, there was written the letters CA and then 19. So CA meant California, and 19, it was apparently the 19th in a series. Some of the other casts had numbers on them. And that was kind of the beginning of my experiments.
Interesting. So, all right. So you kind of latched on to the dermal ridge sort of like narrative and argument that was happening, or presentation, let's say. And of course, like Chilcutt was him and Meldrum, right, together are a big part of that, like, sort of presentation. If you like, I'm not sure the right terminology to use. Idea, that they were finding prints that were being cast with dermal ridges, which would, if proven, open up a authenticity to
That's
that
true, right? That does
particular track. Yeah.
right.
So
That's the argument. So if true, it seems to be beyond something that a hoaxer might be able to fabricate. That's the idea. How would a hoaxer be so sophisticated as to put in dermal ridges on some of these casts? But if you start looking into the history of some of these other casts, and unfortunately, I used to have many books on the subject, and I used to have a copy of Meldrum's book and Kranz's book. So unfortunately, some of this stuff is just having to pull from my memory because I don't have the books anymore. But most of the other casts, there are several other casts besides CA19, which I investigated, which are alleged to contain dermal ridges. And as far as I remember, several of these are from Paul Freeman. And so this bears mentioning because I earlier alluded to Michael Dennett. So Michael Dennett had done quite a bit of investigation into Paul Freeman. There was an article, and it's available online. I don't know, I can't tell you what terms to Google, but it's written by Michael Dennett, and it appeared in Skeptical Inquirer quite a number of years ago now. And Michael Dennett was pals with Rene DeHinden, right? And there's this guy Todd Prescott has uploaded a number of interesting videos to YouTube, and if you start looking through YouTube, there's a video of 3 or 4 guys and Rene DeHinden up by this gun club that he worked at. And DeHinden is displaying a number of casts on the ground that were, I'm not sure whether he made them or they're made by Krantz, but they were in possession of DeHinden, and they were these Paul Freeman casts. And it's really shocking to see how just obviously ridiculous these casts are. They are nothing like each other. And so from what I can tell, from what I can glean about the Paul Freeman stuff, what Freeman was doing is, first of all, he was an experiencer. It's like these UFO people who see a UFO every weekend, right? And they are taken aboard the mothership every weekend, you know. So Paul Freeman had an unbelievably unnatural number of sightings and encounters with evidence. You know, he found handprints and footprints, and he got his video and all this stuff. But so what I think that Freeman was doing was he didn't have a wooden so-called stomper, a prosthetic that he was pounding into the earth. He was going out there and he was excavating the soil. And I once found one of these videos where Freeman is walking along with his camera, and there's a couple of tracks, and it's obvious that he excavated the ground because the soil, the litter, the forest litter, the organic matter is not pressed into the track. You can see forest litter distributed evenly, and then there's this track, and there's no forest litter at the bottom of the track. So what Freeman probably did, in my opinion, is he excavated the track, and then he took his bare hands with no gloves, and he fine-tuned the shape. There's a very interesting comment by Jimmy Chilcutt. So I do not question Chilcutt's ability to perceive human dermal ridges at all, right? So Chilcutt claimed that an individual, a human, had double tapped a soil that had later been cast, okay? So what human might have done that, right? I mean, it is possible to put dermal ridges in a natural soil, but they're extremely fragile, and they will naturally decay in a short period of time. And so whoever made the cast the track very shortly after the track was made, right? So to me, the obvious answer is that, well, the tracks were fabricated by Freeman and then immediately cast by Freeman, and they were fabricated by using his own hands. Thus, the double tap, which were a superimposition of dermal ridges in the track. But you know, so both Meldrum and Krantz have totally signed off on the Freeman stuff. And I would encourage anybody who has an interest in this subject to find that video of DeHinden discussing these Freeman tracks. There were many, but he had just one particular track find. But the tracks are just so grotesquely different from each other, and they're utterly dysmorphic and fanciful. I mean, it is beyond ridiculous that Paul Freeman was anything
red
but a
flag for Meldrum, though. Like I'm just being honest, and that, you know, I don't mean to put you on the spot. Shouldn't that be a red flag for Meldrum, who kind of knows a thing or two about foot morphology? Like, shouldn't that expertise shine through there?
Yeah,
and what you're saying that you notice, you know.
Well, sure. I mean, I've met Jeff Meldrum. I was invited into his lab. I have nothing but positive things to say about him as a person. He was more than congenial and warm to myself and Brendan Bannon, who were there that morning. But if you look at an objective history of things that he's signed off on, he's signed off on various things that were later determined to be fake. I mean, we can talk about the history of the Skookum cast, but
Skookum, there's a
video.
Don't even have to go deep into Skookum. That was all BS.
There's a video. There was a program called Animal X, and it's still online. It's still on YouTube. But on Animal X, he's describing on camera finding dermatoglyphics, another word for dermal ridges, on the Skookum cast, right? And he's on camera doing that, so he can't make it go away and it didn't happen. That's just bullshit. No, it really happened. And so, and there was this Snow Walker film where he's on camera signing off, and well, this is not a man in a suit, and well, he was a man in a suit. So I can't tell you why Meldrum has signed off on the Paul Freeman stuff, but so that's a long-winded way of saying that was. I genuinely do think there are dermal ridges in some of those Paul Freeman casts. Michael Dennett had a cast copy that he showed me of one of these Paul Freeman, and you can see it right, and you can see it right there. Interestingly, it does look like human dermal ridges.
So what is that?
Well, again, as I say, what I think Paul Freeman made the tracks himself using his bare, ungloved hands. He left his dermal ridges in the soil, and then he immediately cast the track, and then he presented them to the world, and people like Krantz and Meldrum's like, oh yeah, it's Bigfoot.
Okay, all right. So, human dermal ridges. Yeah. I'm sorry. When you said actual dermal ridges, my mind immediately went to like, oh wait, are we talking Bigfoot, or are we talking? Like I didn't understand. Sorry, my bad. Matt.
Well, so if you want, I can transition to my investigation into the CA-19 cast.
Yeah, I'd love to hear about that, and then of course, like culminating and getting to like how you got Bigfooter of the Year, okay, from the Bigfoot Times is because of your presentation at a conference where you demonstrated this. So if we could, let's march down those roads.
Right. Well, as I say, a couple elements of the story, it's embarrassing because I've forgotten myself. But what I started doing was I started making test casts myself. I built a wooden box, and I was going down to a place called Seattle Pottery Supply, and I was buying these various inorganic powders like volcanic ash, right, and silica, and I discovered that if you pour wet plaster of Paris onto these very dry, fine substrates, water will be pulled from the plaster slurry into the fine, dry powder. And what's very interesting is that it often leaves very distinctive surface markings on the resulting cast. And this paleontologist that I know, Anton Wroblewski, who did the Skookum cast analysis, dubbed them desiccation ridges. So desiccation is the process of drying out or pulling water from something, right? And so there are a couple points of this process. This is one of those things where you need a PowerPoint presentation to point at these artifacts. But let's take a simple thing. Okay, so if you have a track and you pour plaster in the dead center of the track, it usually makes a little splash as it hits. Okay, imagine if you took a stone and you threw a stone into a pool of water, and the pool of water is completely still, right? Well, what are you going to see a half a second after the stone hits the water? Well, you're going to see a round ring of a wave disruption, and you see that all the time in all kinds of casts. So that is exactly what you see in the cast that Jimmy Chilcutt said are the best one with the clearest dermal ridges, the one I'm talking about, CA-19. Okay, so, and I know this because Meldrum possesses this cast, right, in his lab, and he made copies. That's where Noel got his copy from, I believe. And so Meldrum put like a latex over this cast and then pulled the latex off, and then I think photocopied the latex. It's very clever. So it was a great way to give a visual presentation of the surface textures of this cast. So right in the center of CA19, you see one of these circles, okay? So from there, you can infer that John Green, who made the cast, poured the plaster in the very center of the track. Okay, sounds simple, but it took me a while to figure this out. No one was, I mean, Rick Knoll gave me a little bit of help here and there, but this sounds like I'm bragging, but it's just the truth. I figured all this stuff out by myself. There was no books on the subject. There was no websites on the subject. It was completely novel. It took me months to figure all this stuff out. So the first element that I figured out is when the plaster drops, it makes maybe it's the size of a quarter. It makes a little ring at the. Okay, well, so you find that in the CA19. So we know Green put the plaster in the dead center of the track. That's kind of common sense. All right. And then as plaster spreads out, it spreads out just like you're pouring pancake batter, right? You pour pancake batter on a hot grill, it spreads out into a center. Okay. Well, what happens with thick slurries like pancake batter and plaster of Paris is that sometimes the liquid stalls for a moment. And when it stalls, it leaves an arc. Now, how do I know this? Well, I would simply watch carefully. I would pour the plaster in the substrate, and then I would watch carefully, where does the plaster, the leading edge of the plaster stall? I would make a mental note. I'm like, oh yeah, like 3 inches away. And then the plaster would continue to flow, and then I would allow the cast to set and then pull the cast out. I'm like, oh, okay, there's this big arc. There's this big arc where the plaster stalled. Well, you also see that feature in CA19, okay? Now we're getting serious, because adjacent to that arc, which in CA19 is about 9 centimeters above the heel, okay? Adjacent to that furrow are a band of ridges. And you see that all the time in the kind of experiments that I did, right? Now, here's the deal. So Chilcutt is a guy who works with generally flat, hard surfaces. You know, criminals put their fingerprints on
True.
flat, hard surfaces.
Yep. Windows, doors, walls.
Yes.
Mirrors,
so these
whatever.
These fingerprint examiners are not out there making plaster casts in soils. My understanding is they sometimes make plaster casts of things like, footprint impressions of a person's shoe, or maybe a tire track or something. But in general, so I understand why Chilcutt didn't know what he was looking at, because that's a novel thing. I also asked John Green, did he use any kind of sealant? Because if you're really, really doing it right, you take a thing like hairspray and you spray the hairspray in the track before you put the plaster in. So use of a hairspray would prevent the process that I'm talking about. But Green did not do that.
Yeah.
That's right. Green did not do that when he made this track. Okay. So then you get to what the textures that Chilcutt thought were dermal ridges, right? And you see those around the perimeter of the cast. Well, I got to the point where I could make those textures, and they were just a dead match. They were just an absolute dead match for the what Chilcutt said. Well, these are dermal ridges. And as a sidebar, the textures that Chilcutt said were the best ones, the clearest dermal ridges on CA19, are much, much bigger than the dermal ridges seen in some of these Freeman casts. And Chilcutt kind of never mentioned that. There's a big size difference. They're way, way bigger than human dermal ridges, right? So what surprised me the most is that I figured all this stuff out, and apparently Chilcutt was booked to speak at this Bellingham conference in 2005, and he couldn't make it. And the guy, Jason Valente, asked Chilcutt, well, is there somebody else you'd recommend? And so by this time, Chilcutt had heard about my investigations. So Chilcutt actually recommended me. He's like, we should talk to this Matt Crowley. This Matt Crowley guy is doing some interesting stuff,
That's hilarious.
So it is, And so I'm like, okay, sure. And so Rick Knoll helped me put together this PowerPoint display. And I do this presentation, and I privately showed some of my test casts to Meldrum and this guy Owen Caddy at the Bellingham conference. And I gave my presentation. And then Meldrum stands up to give a question, and I was kind of on pins and needles, like, "Oh fuck, I'm gonna ream me here or something, I'm gonna get red cheeks and embarrassed." But he said something to the effect like, "I think you're being much too tentative. I think you've hit it out of the park." So I'm like, wow. So that was amazing. And then there was a conference in Pocatello, which I went to, and that's the point where Meldrum allowed me to come into his lab, and I was able to photograph the same cast that Chilcutt examined. And here's where it gets very interesting, because Meldrum and another guy whose name is Lon Erickson had made a test cast of a human foot in this soil, a very, very fine, dry soil called loess in Idaho. And I know this because this guy, Lon Erickson, wrote his name on the top of the cast, right? So here's a human cast, and it's got some human dermal ridges. It's this guy Erickson's foot, but it's also got the desiccation ridges that I'm talking about in the cast, right? So that it proves that it's more than just these simulants that I was using. So I was using these simulants that I got from Seattle Pottery Supply, but Meldrum himself proved that these desiccation ridges occur in natural soils. There's and I never brought it up in 2005, but if you remember, Ray Wallace had died in 2002, and the whole double ball tracks had been matched to these prosthetics that the Wallace family had, and they were just an absolute dead match, right? Well, the 13-inch, I think it's 13-inch track of CA19 was part of that Blue Creek Mountain track find of 1967. So it's highly indicative along multiple lines of evidence that the tracks themselves were hoaxed tracks, and the textures on the cast were not dermal ridges, but these desiccation ridges.
That's fascinating. And what do you think? I mean, what do you think the probabilities are, like versus a natural, actual Bigfoot walking around, that there's even like just a little trace, it seems like, of dermal ridges. Doesn't seem like anything like really truly pops out. It's just like, oh wow, these might be.
Well, Meldrum has something like 200 casts in his laboratory, and my understanding is that there's only a very small number, like 4 or 5 that have ever been claimed to have the dermal ridges, and it's my understanding that the other ones are mostly from the Paul Freeman. Now, I've personally seen. Do you remember Tom Powell?
Mm-hmm.
So Powell, I believe it was Powell. If not, I'm embarrassed that I've gotten his name wrong. But I was at just a get together, this kind of Bigfoot get together down in Portland, and I think it was Powell or one of his associates that brought a cast that was labeled Bee Creek. I think that's down in Oregon. And I looked at this cast and I'm like, oh my God, I think there are dermal ridges on this cast. Now, for some reason, that never made it into the conversation. So I mean, I am open-minded enough to say that, well, if there is such a creature and it is a primate, and all the primates, Chilcutt is correct, all these primates do have dermal ridges, just like humans. They would have them on the bottom of their feet. And if they were making real tracks, some of them probably would have dermal ridges on them. I remain skeptical that I remain skeptical of Bigfoot in general. So I think that there are natural explanations for the casts that Meldrum possesses. I don't think any of them represent true Bigfoot.
Sure. There's at least other explanations, which it sounds like you were actually kind of thorough in your sort of like working that out,
I feel I was, and I knew that there is a status game in the Bigfoot world, right? So a guy like Chilcutt is afforded very high status because he is a legitimate fingerprint expert, and people are going to go, who's this Matt Crowley guy? We've never heard of him before. Who is this guy, right? And so I spent months figuring this stuff out. I spent months testing and learning as much as I could about these things until I felt I had an airtight case. And I was not the only person who felt I had an airtight case. And I think Meldrum's comment at this conference really sealed the deal, at least in the mind of Daniel Perez. I had nothing to do with that. I mean, he's the one who labeled me Bigfooter of the Year. So that's
you weren't knocking on his door for that title. That's for sure.
No, I actually did not know who he was at that time.
Right. Yeah. I mean, that's just that's funny. It's also funny. But God, I wish I had that on film, man. I wish that somebody had taken film of you doing that and Meldrum saying that, like just as you described it, would be very powerful, actually.
Probably true. I had a website for a number of years, and I went into minute detail of everything I did on this website. And but it came to a point a few years ago where it was very expensive. It was like $300 a year, and I'm like, God, that's a lot, And so I felt that it was a narrow, esoteric point. I felt I'd made my point. I will say that everybody interested in the Bigfoot question should go out and buy Chris Murphy's Know the Sasquatch book. It's excellent. I'm friends with Chris Murphy, or acquaintances. He's a good guy. His book is very well done. It's color, excellent photography. It's got a bunch of great reproductions, a number of those Patterson stills, a whole bunch of photographs of different casts. And Murphy asked me to write up like a page summary of my results, right? And I said, I will do it on the one condition that you do not edit me, It's like, okay, fine. So, so his book is very much an advocate book, but he is open-minded enough to allow this piece of evidence, my evidence, that went a little bit against the grain. So kudos to Murphy. So there will be a time when I'm gone and the books will still be in circulation and people can go, oh, wow, that's interesting.
Well, I mean, that's how science works. Different opinions. Open-mindedness is, I mean, every good scientist should be open-minded. That's not always the case.
Yeah.
Well,
I want to follow up. I don't. It's your show. I won't want to direct this, but you did allude to the Skookum cast. So there are a couple of elements of the story which you may not be familiar with, that I would feel good about presenting if you're interested.
Bring it. Let's talk about the Skookum cast, which is one of those things that is like it became this cherished thing in the Bigfoot narrative, and even to this day, probably for some people, especially those that were involved, right? And that, it's just it's one of those things that it becomes a cherished piece of gold nugget to hold on to as wow. And Skookum cast.
Yeah. Well, so I mean, it had a personal resonance with me because, as I say, in 2000, I had seen this segment on the internet about the Skookum cast, and that's what kind of hooked me again. I'd been interested in the early 70s, but then 30 years passed, and I'd forgotten about the subject. And well, this is Skookum cast. I'm like, well, that's very interesting. I'm curious about it. And so, as I say, I met up with Noel because I was investigating the dermal ridge stuff. Noel made the Skookum cast. He had the plaster in his truck. He's the one who was out there doing the casting. So I was pulled into this. I also knew Owen Caddy. I met Caddy through Noel, and Caddy had made this analysis of the cast and claimed, it's hard to say this with a straight face today, but claimed, well, we know that the Bigfoot who made the impression was male because we find testicular impressions in the cast, right? And I can personally attest that Caddy is a smart guy. He had been a game warden in like Uganda or something and had tracked animals in there. And so, I thought, wow, I'm in this awesome position because I know these two guys, these two alpha Bigfooters in this domain, right? And as I say, I got pulled into Bigfoot forums, and I'd post on Bigfoot forums periodically. And then out of nowhere, there's this guy on Bigfoot forums was posting his Desert Yeti. I didn't know who this guy was. And so this guy, Desert Yeti, says, well, I've done an analysis of the copies because the copies were made of the Skookum cast in fiberglass. I've seen the copies, and they were on display at a museum in Texas. So this guy, Desert Yeti, was down in Texas, and he says, well, I've done an analysis of these cast copies, and it's a big cervid, and I've run it by Mark Elbrock. Now, I didn't know who Mark Elbrock was. Well, apparently Mark Elbrock is the most highly esteemed ichnologist in the world, or one of the top. Ichnology is the specific study of animal traces, right? Tracks, burrows, things like that. And I was embarrassed because I'd never heard of ichnology. All those years of looking at the Skookum cast, I thought, well, wow, if there was only some kind of a specialist who could look at this
exactly.
and tell us what it is.
Yeah, no kidding. I'm excited to hear those people exist. I want to get them on board, like talk to them. Yeah, go ahead.
So I didn't know who Desert Yeti was. I didn't know who Mark Elbrock was. And of course, he throws that out there, and immediately Caddy and Noel like, oh, you're full of shit. You're wrong. You don't know anything. What are you talking about? And this goes in a back and forth for a while, and I'm kind of scratching my head like, well, okay, who's this Desert Yeti guy? And then so Desert Yeti reveals himself as a guy named Dr. Anton Wroblewski, right? He's got a PhD in paleontologist, and he has I think a master's degree in the relevant science of ichnology, right? So you may have seen it, but what he did was he took a photograph of the copy and executed in fiberglass and a picture of a reclining elk, and he drew red lines like, okay, here's the front joint, here's this, here's that, here's the chest, there's a hoof, once you see so it's like to me it's like those optical illusions that you see on the internet periodically. Okay, some guy will put up a picture of like a jungle or wilderness, and they'll say, where is the snake? And you look at this picture and you go, I don't see a snake. And you go, no, there's really a snake in there. Just keep looking, and you look at it, and about 2 minutes later, you're like, oh my God, there's a snake right there. And it's a testament to the ability of animals to camouflage in their environment. But my point is that once you see the snake, you can't unsee the snake. It sticks out like a sore thumb, right? So yes. Once you see like the elk's hoof, you go like, oh my God, it really is an elk. And so my world shifted a whole bunch because I realized at that moment that Noel and Caddy were grossly mistaken. And Meldrum. And in fact, it broadened from there. And that was kind of the turning point for me as a Bigfooter, right? Because between about 2000 and about 2006, I kind of consider myself an agnostic. It's like, well, I don't really know yet. I would like to investigate all this stuff more carefully before I come to a well thought out opinion. And in 2006 or so, I'm like, I don't believe it. And the reason I don't believe it is because all the evidence that's promoted for Bigfoot is all filtered through a bunch of alpha Bigfooters, these like high status guys, whether that's the BFRO or whether that's Jeff Meldrum or whether that's Rick Knoll and Owen Caddy, a bunch of these kind of self-appointed alpha Bigfooters. All the evidence is analyzed and promoted through them. I mean, the Skookum cast guys made a dumb mistake because they should have found an ichnologist right away before they got on camera saying, well, there's dermal ridges on the cast. And to put a fine point on this, Anton Wroblewski was at a conference in Bellevue a number of years later, in about 2010, and I met up with him twice, on two successive nights, and we talked about Bigfoot for a very long time, right? So Anton told me something to really put a fine point. How bad is the Skookum cast fiasco? Well, it's this bad. So Anton would play a game with fellow ichnologists. He would say to these fellow ichnologists, okay, I'm going to flash a picture of a cast on a screen, and I want you to tell me what it is. And he would time them with a stopwatch. He would time them. So he would flash the picture. Average time for these people to see that it was an elk, 15 seconds. And Anton's parting comment was, Jeff Meldrum is the laughingstock of the professional ichnology community. I mean, that's how bad it is. It's really bad.
You're saying that that was back then. Like, we're in 2024. I think it's
well.
worse.
If you go onto the BFRO website today, the last time I checked, they still promote it.
Yeah.
And
of
that
course.
should give you an understanding about where their head is at.
Dude, though, if I hear a tree fall in the woods, they'll promote that. I mean, come on.
Yeah.
That's where
There's
we're
even
at,
Here's a bit of a sidebar backstory to the fiasco. So Daniel Perez is what you might call an advocate. He generally promotes the reality of Bigfoot as an animal. Okay,
that's fair. Yeah.
That's fair. So he surprisingly sometimes publishes material in Bigfoot Times that goes against the grain, right? And he surprisingly put in a feature story in Bigfoot Times about the Skookum cast, in which he allowed Anton to explain why it's an elk, right? And he got a bunch of grief for that. And he got a letter from Rick Knoll saying, well, what Anton looked at were, quote, art pieces, right? As I said earlier, what Anton saw were cast copies executed in fiberglass. There was a male and a female cast copy of the original Skookum cast, right? So let's think about what Rick Knoll said. Okay, the two words, an art piece. Okay, if he's speaking literally, what the hell are they doing promoting modern art as Bigfoot evidence? That's fraud. Okay, that's straight up fucking fraud. If Rick Knoll is speaking metaphorically that these cast copies were not faithful copies, again, what are they doing promoting that as Bigfoot evidence if they're not faithful copies? Okay, but there's a reality here which again shines a poor light on the ethical structure of Rick Knoll. Okay, so as I say, I knew Chris Murphy before this all erupted, or at some point I asked Chris Murphy, and Chris Murphy told me, well, where do these cast copies come from? They were commissioned by John Green. Why were they commissioned by John Green? Because John Green had witnessed the Patterson film fail to make an impact in the academic world. It failed to convince the academics.
Yep.
John Green felt that if the Skookum cast was so good that if it was trucked around to the universities and shown to the relevant academics, that they would be persuaded as to the reality of Bigfoot. Wow. So John Green ponied up a bunch of money to have these cast copies made. Okay. So I think that Rick Knoll's comment that they were art pieces was way out of line. They were not art pieces. They were very, very serious copies in the best circumstances, commissioned by John Green, as scientific evidence.
Yep. It was blown up to the scientific evidence level. People in the Bigfoot world were excited about it. And it's a laughingstock. I mean, it's one of the greatest examples of I'm sorry. And man, I'm not I'm not as articulate as you. I'm just gonna say it like I say it. How in the hell does an elk laying down on the fucking ground ever turn into some big, great Bigfoot discovery? That shows you everything you need to know about the subject and just how
Yeah.
easy it is to turn that phrase, to flip that switch, to
Well,
become
there's
a
there's a
narrative that is false.
there's a joke that everybody uses, but there's a reality to the joke. The joke being Bigfoot on the brain, right? You go out into the woods, and as you say, every
It's a
twig
saying.
that
It's not
snaps.
a joke. Matt, it's not a joke. It's a saying. Like that's a
Yeah.
legitimate. When I say Bigfoot on the brain, I mean that 1,000% legitimate.
Yeah.
That is not. I'm not joking on anybody, man.
Yeah.
But go ahead. Sorry to interrupt.
Well, that's the point. It's these guys, Krantz and Meldrum are great examples that they are so deeply invested in this stuff that it's amazing what they will interpret as Bigfoot. So I've been looking at this recently. Do you have a copy of Murphy's Know the Sasquatch?
No.
Okay, I would recommend you getting a copy. But here's my thought experiment. Okay, so get yourself a copy of Know the Sasquatch and turn to these like page 124 or something. There's several pages of really high quality color photographs of various track casts. Right. If you take the Bigfoot on the brain away for just a moment and you look at them just as sculptures, you will notice that they're all different. They're all different in shape. Okay, the Patterson casts, the toes are fairly straight. They're kind of all straight like this. The Blue Creek Mountain associated with Ray Wallace, this classic double ball, which is seen nowhere else. That's totally different, right? The Harryford cast, very very sculpturally sound, but different shape than the Patterson. And if you go into the Paul Freeman stuff, wow, talk about modern art. Some of those Paul Freeman casts are just nuts. And so it's like if you got 10 artists in a room and you told every artist, okay, draw a picture of Santa Claus, you're going to get 10 different Santa Clauses. They're all going to have a familial resemblance. Each one of them, you're going to go, well, yeah, that's Santa Claus, but they're all going to be reflective of the artistic sensibility. So I don't feel bad about saying it's obvious to me that they're all fake. All the tracks are all fake. They're all made by humans. They're all made by I would call them pranksters or artists. To me it's folk art. In the Bigfoot world, they're hoaxers and they're bad, right?
Right.
But if you look at someone like Ray Wallace, it's obviously a big hilarious joke to him.
But I know what you're saying from the artistic side. It goes beyond being a prankster if you're emotionally invested in your art, and that's just how you chose to project your art onto the world to make this fine creation of what somebody's going to come along and call a Bigfoot track, because if your art's good enough, it's extremely compelling. Maybe
So have you
even
followed?
to a professional foot morphologist, right?
So are
What
you
better way
familiar
to
with
make your art off the charts?
That's right. It's like these people who create fake paintings that fool some of the experts. I mean, what an ego boost that you're so good as a forger that you can fool the art experts, and maybe even make some money off of it. But are you familiar with the cripple foot of Ivan Marx?
Yes.
Right. That is a perfect example. Okay. This is something that Grover Krantz absolutely signed off on. He made these hyperbolic statements to the effect that any person who's smart enough to scam Grover Krantz has got to be smarter than Leonardo da Vinci. and I haven't seen that
Yep.
person, so therefore the track is real. You know, I mean, he's putting himself up there with Leonardo da Vinci. I mean, it's like, wow. So, however,
Right.
so if you look at those crazy films that Ivan Marx made, Ivan Marx was a guy like Paul Freeman. He was discovering Bigfoot every Thursday of every month. You know, he was out there, all this stuff, collecting
he
all
was
this stuff.
he ended up being a proven hoaxer.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But one of his hoaxes shows a cripple-foot Bigfoot running through a field, and it's as hokey as can be. It's amateur hour, and it's like these Bigfooters, they don't put that together. It's like, well, cripple-foot track, cripple-foot film. It's the same goddamn thing. So that is the reason that I conclude that Marx got very lucky with the fake foot, you know, that he got Krantz to sign off on it, but he wasn't as good a hoaxer when it came to his films as he was to his track casts.
Well, you know, there's terminology in the Bigfoot world, and if you know of Thomas Steenberg, he will cite this a lot. Which is, Thomas, obviously he's one of the last sort of dudes connected to those kind of Four Horsemen guys, you know.
Yeah.
But it's called the Ivan Marx syndrome. But what that's based on is, okay, the guy had a real experience or found something real, whatever that is, and because of the attention he got off that, he sought like more attention, and that was his motivation for getting into the world of hoaxing, is to keep the attention up. Because I mean, honestly, even if you had one real Bigfoot experience, you're probably not going to ever have one again. You shouldn't, right? Mathematically speaking.
Yes.
And so Ivan Marx syndrome is actually terminology in the Bigfoot world.
Oh, that's funny.
That somebody like Steenberg will say very, you know, every chance he gets, he'll say that. So that's real terminology because of Ivan Marx.
Yeah. So again, I'm not going to direct your program, but I wonder if we could touch on the Elbatrax.
Now, see, I don't. You had mentioned that to me on Facebook. I don't know what the Elbatrax are. So yeah, go for it.
All the more reason to give you my discourse on them.
Yes, please.
Okay, so let's preface this. Do you remember the Sonoma video?
That's familiar. I can't visualize what video that is.
So I made this post on the Facebook coalition group about Bigfoot cover-ups. Okay, so I'm a fan of Penn and Teller, and this occurred in about I want to say about 2004 or something. I can't remember the exact date, but so there was a very short film or video made, I think, from a cell phone somewhere allegedly in California, of what appeared to be a Bigfoot, you know, running through a kind of a hilltop, right? Well, the BFRO seized upon this film, and it was called the Sonoma video. And they actually put up a web page. The BFRO put up a web page, and they say, we have investigated this, and we know what Bigfoots look like, and we know this is the real deal. There were other guys. I believe the guy's name is John Freitas. He had investigated the person who put forth the video and found inconsistencies in this individual's story. And he found that the individual did not know where the film had actually been taken place and other significant inconsistencies. And so this guy Freitas came to the conclusion that this is a hoax. But the BFRO was like lambasting Freitas, like, this guy doesn't know what he's talking about, and we know all about Bigfoot, and we know this video is real. Of course. Okay.
Yeah.
So Penn and Teller announced that the video was a hoax because they made it, right? Okay. When they announced it, within like 10 minutes, the BFRO webpage is gone. Poof, erased from the internet. Poof, made to go away in a cover-up that would warm the heart of Richard Nixon, right?
Yeah, right.
Okay, so And so then Matt Moneymaker actually accused Penn and Teller of lying.
Good
Well,
luck
they're
with that.
lying about this. They're trying to take credit for something. They're lying, and then of course it appeared on Penn and Teller bullshit where the guy, did the classic Scooby Doo. He takes off the headpiece. And, oh, it's a guy in a suit, right? So it was proven that they made this video, and the BFRO.
Okay.
This guy who made the video sent the BFRO this evidence, right, by email, and the BFRO was just all over it, like, oh, we know what Bigfoots are, and this is real, and we can help you, and this and that. So it utterly punked Matt Moneymaker and the BFRO.
Of course.
But my point in this is that the evidence of the malfunction of the BFRO was made to go away, magically disappeared from the internet. Okay.
Of course.
So the Elb tracks in about 2010, a series of Bigfoot tracks was found in I believe it's called the Elb River, not too far south from here in Seattle, somewhere in Western Washington. Okay.
Rainier, I believe.
I don't know. I think so.
That's what Brent, my buddy Brent was saying. Hold on. Let me pull it up, Matt. I was at the Elb Trackway location a couple of years ago. I put a video up on my channel of the area. It's southwest of Rainier.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So a number of individuals descended upon the trackway, and I don't know some of these people. I believe Derek Randalls was one of them, and I think Rick Knoll was out there, and some of these other guys. And there was a flurry of excitement, right? There's a flurry of excitement over this, and independently, one of these Bigfoot guys started matching the IP address of emails sent to the BFRO with other emails, and if that's a sidebar story in and of itself. But they came to the conclusion that they had been hoaxed, right? And this had occurred in about a week, right? So it went from wow, this is super awesome, this is the real deal, Meldrum says they look good kind of thing, to it's a hoax, right? But the deeper point is that the thread on the Bigfoot forums was made to go away. Now, why would they do that? Why would they do that? Because you have written evidence of these alpha Bigfooters jumping up and down, proclaiming that it's the real deal, right? And so it shows that these alpha Bigfooters are not able to analyze evidence like they think they are. They can misanalyze evidence. They can fall for hoaxes. It's a long-standing, long-running problem, and this is ultimately why I am at this point a complete skeptic, because, as I say, all this stuff gets filtered through these alpha Bigfooters, and they have a very poor track record of analysis of evidence.
Mm-hmm. I agree with you, Matt. And what you're speaking of is actually way back in the day stuff. To be honest with you, the way it is today is that it is broken down to it.
I think we've lost Pat here for a minute. I'll hang on to the video for a couple minutes. Oh, you back?
And I'm back. Yeah, I warned you that might happen.
I held firm.
And
I'm sorry. So you're saying that back in the day,
but today, it's even worse. It's not just the 3 or 4 alpha Bigfooters. It's there's 1,000 tribes. Because technology has improved, obviously, since, say, 2010, right? Even 2016, even 2018. Technology has improved where you and I can have this discussion right now so easily.
Yes.
Any phone, any computer, bam, you're in. And so Bigfooters figured that shit out, and they started creating channels. They wanted in the game. And then the people that come along with that, the people that want to talk about it, they want in the game. They could be on any show. It's just as easy as it's right in your front pocket
Yeah.
to go, hey, I heard whoops. I heard knocks. I heard this, whatever. And so now the narrative, Matt, has become so solidified into an echo chamber that it's like it's even way beyond what you're talking about with the, with Meldrum getting fooled by the Skookum cast and how big that was. Like nobody
Right.
cares about the Skookum cast anymore. They might know about it, but it's
Right.
not relevant in the narrative. It's lost.
Yeah.
The Skookum cast
Yeah.
is lost in the narrative. It's all about, hey, what did this popular Bigfoot researcher say on that show last weekend?
Yeah.
I mean, that's where it's at. I'm just letting
Yeah.
you know. It's not 4 gatekeepers. It's 1,000, and they
Yeah.
all control the narrative because they run with the narrative. That's how
Well,
they control it. Yeah.
I listened to the audiobook version of a very influential book for me. It was called The Status Game by a guy named Will Storr. And he is able to analyze human behavior. A lot of social human behavior is due to the drive to achieve status in different ways. And you see it, as I'm sure you see it in Bigfootery. And as you are correctly describing, that there was a time when there was like 4 guys, and they were clearly the 4 guys at the peak of this kind of pyramid of status, right? But as you say, technology has enabled other people to kind of climb up that hill to try to get their own kind of status.
Exactly. Yes. Thank you. Oh my God, I want to cry. That was a beautiful statement you just made, and very, very well said. I mean, climb up that hill, and they're right there. They're the same. Like they have the same fucking power, Matt.
Yeah. Yeah.
They have the same power because again, like where's my phone? My phone's back there charging. Pretend I'm holding up my phone. It's the most powerful fucking tool on the planet for human beings, modern day humans.
Yeah.
You can do anything with it. Yeah.
One of my biases just is age, right? Having read On the Track of the Sasquatch when I was 9, right? And so the argument that John Green was trying to make was always, well, we think it's just an animal, and it doesn't help to explain one mystery by another mystery. So Green was fairly good about dismissing paranormal explanations for Bigfoot, and saying, well, we think it's just another animal. And, that sounded great to me. Like, okay, it's nothing woo woo. It's not
right.
flying saucers and ESP and Ouija boards. It's just another animal. Right. And I really ran with that for a long time. And so I'm of an age where the best reason to believe in Bigfoot is the physical evidence. And that's what I was really concentrating on. And so I'm sure Bigfooters would not like what I'm about to say, but a lot of these Bigfooters, they seem to lean on the idea of the knower. Oh, well, this guy's a knower. He's seen Bigfoot. He's a knower, right? Well, I would suggest for anyone who believes that's good evidence to investigate very seriously the belief in fairies in Britain. Fairy belief is more popular perhaps in Britain than in the United States, but this magazine 40 Times recently reported on a census. There was some researchers that were very seriously trying to take a census of people's fairy experiences. I personally knew a gal, she's deceased, but she claimed to have cavorted with fairies for like an hour in her childhood, right? And I don't think she was lying to me. I think she was neurologically divergent a little bit.
Psychological problem, maybe?
I think so, but that's neither here nor there. I think she was being honest, right? So I can't tell you, if there is no Bigfoot, what these people are seeing in the bush. I tend to believe it's some of them are lying, some of them are having false memories, and some of them are having weird misperceptions of one sort or another. But ultimately, I don't know. But you have to ask the same thing about what do people see when they see fairies? I don't know that either. I don't know what's in their mind when they report they're seeing fairies. So I was always fascinated with the physical evidence bit of it, and that's where I felt really kind of let down.
Yeah. Well, really? I mean, what are you talking about, Matt? How could you be
Yeah.
let down? Because there's physical evidence of them everywhere. Don't you understand that anecdote is evidence?
Right.
Right?
Right.
I mean, anecdote is evidence. That's what Bigfooters will stand by that all day long.
Yeah.
Anecdote is evidence. And they'll even go so far as to say, hey, a court of law.
Yeah.
Eyewitness testimony is evidence. No, it's
Well,
not. No, it's not.
there are these certain arguments that just won't die. They're like whack-a-mole, right? And so
Yes.
that's an
Right.
old argument that just pops up, and it gets explained and debunked. And science is not a court of law. There are different rules of evidence in the world of science and the world of law, so that you can't make
Exactly.
But it's and
Yeah.
this is a problem I have, because I'm concerned that after I'm gone, people are going to watch, Legend Meets Science, and they'll go, "Well, look at this fingerprint expert. He says there's dermal ridges in this cast." And that my own contribution will have been forgotten. But I am glad that Murphy got it in his book, so that will live on past me. But you must know this pattern of whack-a-mole, where certain ideas just keep cropping up again and again and again.
Yes, I do. And I don't know that I have the energy to whack-a-mole them. All I know is that, anecdote, like, so in a court of law, evidence is we found blood from the victim on the accused, or we found the murder weapon, or we found the fingerprints. Like, that's hard evidence.
Yeah.
And so a case is built off of these different things. Eyewitness testimony is nothing more than an attempt to persuade a jury. That's it. And a good counter argument. So when the other side gets to interview the witness, right, can completely destroy that testimony. It happens all the time. So anecdote in court to a jury, which is only fucking 12 people, 12 people don't decide whether a biological species is legitimate or not.
Right.
We're talking about a human construct for a rule of law in a modern society of humans. Anecdote is nothing more than an attempt to persuade a jury. That's it.
Yeah.
And a good counter argument can completely destroy that and discredit that eyewitness testimony and make them contradict themselves. And that's so easy to do in the Bigfoot world. You can make people contradict themselves all the time.
Well, there's been a great deal of research by a gal named Elizabeth Loftus on the nature of false memory, and I kind of discovered that accidentally myself. I saw the movie Tommy when it came out in a theater, and back then in the mid '70s, the only way you could see a movie twice was if it was on TV, or else if it played like as a midnight movie. So a number of years later, I saw it as a midnight movie. And I was expecting this particular scene to play out in a certain way. And when I saw it again in the midnight movie, it did not play out in the way that I remembered it. And I was really rattled, like, wow, is my memory wrong? And yes, my memory had created a false memory of what I thought I saw in the movie. But what actually was in the movie was the same thing. And so that was in the '70s, and I, as I say, I was rattled by that. And it wasn't until many years later that I encountered the work of Elizabeth Loftus, who had studied the nature of false memory and has done quite a bit of work in courts testifying to that as a psychological reality. So there is a reason that physical evidence is just better than eyewitness evidence.
Yeah. And that's another way to say it. What I just say is anecdote isn't evidence because it's not. If I say, you know, I mean, I use weird analogies, right? So if somebody called me on the phone right now and said, "Hey, man, I just dropped $1 million briefcase into your backyard," and
Right.
they hung up, does that make it real?
Right.
Does them speaking that make it real? No. It's either they either did it or they didn't, right? And so when I go up my backyard and I don't find a freaking briefcase full of $1 million, that anecdote was just nothing more than not reality, because
Well,
words
I
don't
get
create reality.
I get kind of an unfortunate, sad sense that for some of these people, the Bigfoot world is like live action role play, and part of live action role play is that you can tell
Right.
lies and make stuff up, right, with impunity because it's
Wow.
Bigfoot, right?
Yeah.
And that bothers me a lot because it seems to me that an ethical person can navigate life without lying at all.
Yeah,
So
you're right.
why
I mean,
should you tell any lies
that's
if you're
why I had
talking
you on
about the
tonight.
subject of Bigfoot?
Yeah.
But people do. Well, Pat, I don't want to be abrupt, but I'm going to do a Zoom call with my domestic partner here momentarily. I hope
Yeah.
we were able to cover some of the topics he wanted, and I hope I didn't talk too much. I tend to talk a bit.
I mean, no, we've covered some good bases, and we can pick this conversation up anytime you want, my friend.
Okay, cool.
Um,
Well, thank you. Thanks for allowing me the platform.
Absolutely. You're welcome here anytime. Again, Ben's been on here, Brian Dunning's been on here. So
Was that right? Oh, I
you
didn't know
have
that.
you're walking in the footsteps of other skeptics who I've had on. It's just that my mind is a little different, a lot different. Even back then when I taught, like I've had Ben on twice, so
Is this program recorded in a way that's accessible after the broadcast?
oh yeah, yes, it'll download to YouTube immediately.
Oh,
So
very good. Okay. Well, I used a
yeah.
few expletives. Is that going to be
No,
okay on the?
that's fine with me.
Okay, good.
Yeah. Yeah, it's
I know. I know
it's
that.
okay. It's okay to curse on YouTube.
I wasn't sure. I
Yeah.
didn't know the
Yeah.
policy. So okay, yeah.
No, it's
Few
okay to
a few
curse.
bullshits in there, in the
No,
conversation.
it curse words are just fine. That's no big
All right.
deal.
Well, thank you very much, Pat. I'm very appreciative that you had me on. So we'll do it again sometime.
Absolutely. I'll have you back on in a heartbeat, and maybe even we'll do a skeptical panel one night we'll get you, we'll get Ben, and we'll get Brian Dunning or whoever. Like I'll have 20 skeptics come on, man. We'll have that discussion. Because I'm really leaning more towards just the reality and reasonable perspective towards the subject, without being people, which you haven't done tonight. You haven't been disrespectful or knee jerk about anything. Not at one point did you say Bigfoot's just bullshit. You never said that. Never said that. So um I love the real discussions. And
Good.
so I appreciate you being here. I feel like you represented yourself in a very professional, articulate way.
Good. Good.
And
Good.
I appreciate that. I hope the Bigfoot world does too.
I
We'll
hope so
see.
too. Yeah. All right. Good night then.
All right. Good night. Have a good one, man.
All right.
Well, that was interesting. Like a lot to take in there. Like it was actually a little deeper than I thought it would be. But it was very interesting. But the Bigfoot world won't care. They'll go, oh, you don't know what you're talking about. You've never seen one. Until you see one, you'll know. Like that's what the Bigfoot world will do. And like they always do. It's like, man, look, there's something to learn from that conversation. No matter who you are in the Bigfoot world, no matter how deep your beliefs go, no matter how like 15,000 Bigfoot you fucking seen in your life, there's something to learn from that conversation. I think. But if not, fine. But again, I'm way more interested in having a conversation with somebody like Matt than I am, a Bigfooter. And, when I say Bigfooter, you know what I mean. I mean, look, last night I had Eric on, I had Tristan on, so like people like that, like that's not who I'm talking about when I say Bigfooter. Jeff, obviously. If I talk to a fucking Bigfooter, like the people that went out to the LBL this past weekend, like that's probably not going to be a conversation. Probably should be framed more in a debate format, because I would need that structure to actually properly talk to them. You know what I mean? It's not going to be casual. They're going to immediately fall back on their self-defense positions. They're immediately going to start talking about, well, have you ever been to the LBL, Pat? No, no. I've been around that area. I went to Paducah once or twice. It's like right by there. like, stupid. Anyway, thanks for being here, guys and gals. I appreciate you all. I think I'm just gonna wrap it up. I see no reason to make this into like anything too much more than what it just was. The show, I think I want this show to just stand, right where it's at. Me and Matt talking, and Matt, very articulately giving his opinions about things, and not just opinions, but knowledge. That's worth something. It's an honest discussion. Take it for what it is. Even you, Meldrum, like Dr. Meldrum, you should watch this show and take it for what it is. And be a part of the honest discussion. That should be way bigger than any fucking conference that ever happens about Bigfoot, where honest discussions are not being had. Let's be honest. Say honest one more time, motherfucker. I want to punch myself in the face right now. Hey, look. Yeah, I'd love to. I actually had a bigger idea than that. But something like that could work. I don't know that Meldrum would do it. Honestly. I mean, again, I'd have to go through a third party, I think, to make that happen. Did I say honest again? Should I punch myself in the face? Hey, you guys want to talk to Pete? Come here. Pete. All right, so I'll wrap it up with Pete. I'll throw a little outro and wrap it up because I really do. I want the show to just kind of stand on its own. I don't want to, as much as I'd love to talk to you guys, I'd rather just end the stream now and then come right back and do a live stream after show. Hey everybody, what's up, Scotch Talk World? I can tell that I'm talking to you guys. I see Mr. 3APO in chat. Hold on, I gotta like Pat's hand. I see Carl in chat. Hey, what's up, Carl? What's up? How you doing, buddy? Yeah, we need lawyers if in New Orleans. We're coming, maybe New Orleans. I see Tristan. Tristan's my friend. I maybe did a licky face on Tristan. Hey, so good. Fucking licky face. Haha. I was like, you're a good pussy, man. And then I said, you know what I always say, guys? I say the same thing every fucking time, man. If you see a Sasquatch, you stupid fucking humans, bite it. Why not? Why not, man? That's what I would do. You think I'm scared? Oh, Pete, stop. You almost ruined the bit, Pete. You think I'm scared by a Sasquatch? I'm not. You should fucking bite it. And then you get what? What happens when you bite Sasquatch? Can anybody in chat answer? What happens? Come on, man. We've done this bit 100 times. What happens when you bite a Sasquatch? Chat. Come, yep. Yeah. I'm not. Hey, I'm not scared, Lockbeard. You shut up, man. I'll bite you. What happens when you bite a Sasquatch, man? What happens? See, nobody can answer. You get DNA sample for Dobby Orcutt. All right, DNA sample for Dobby Orcutt. You get really distracted by something right now. Hold on. Yeah, I don't want to do podcasts anymore, Pat. I want to investigate what's going on out by the door. So I'm out, man. Hey, look at my cute fucking face. I'm out. And so am I. You get bad breath. Yeah. You get... Peek and sing. Maybe. So how are we gonna wrap it up tonight? I gotta play. I'm gonna play something that doesn't get me demonetized, just because I want to make the 50 fucking cents I earned tonight by putting this great informative show together for you guys. I don't want to lose that 50 cents. Sorry. How about this? Yeah, let's go with Ben. I'm gonna go with Ben on this one. I'll see you guys next time. Not sure when. I may or may not. I mean, I'm on a roll, dude. 3 nights, 3rd show in a row. May keep that going. We'll see. Thanks for being here, everybody. Hey, look, chat, especially, I appreciate each and every single one of you, even though I don't do roll calls. Sorry. That ain't my style. It's boring. Roll calls bore the fucking audience. But this is my roll call to say I appreciate you being here and engaging in chat. Your opinions are more than welcome, whatever they are, as long as they don't come with a look motherfucker attitude. Right? You can say whatever you want here. This is free speech dome. And I've said that before, and I just want to reiterate it. You could be critical or you could be positive. You could have my back. You could fucking want to slap me in the face. That's fine. Bring it. Say it. Get it off your chest. You're fucking welcome here. So that I appreciate my live viewers always in a way that nobody else fucking ever talks about. Except when the donos come in. Boy, then when the donations come in, boy, there's a lot of love. Anyway, I'm going to get the fuck off my high horse. Thanks for being here. Appreciate you all. Good night.
That this is part of the problem is that the people that should be doing good quality evidence aren't doing it, or they're doing very little of it. And the people, and including many skeptics, such as myself, the late Daniel Dennett, and others, were trying to help the Bigfoot community get better quality evidence, right? I'm not on your show to dismiss and debunk
Right.
Bigfoot. I'm here to try and encourage people to do better quality evidence, so that way, next year and next month, 10 years from now, people can say, well, either the evidence has not improved, that is, maybe there's no Bigfoot there, or whatever methods they're using aren't working at all. And so, I mean, that's the problem here, is that if these creatures are out there, then whatever methods are being used, such as the Skookum cast, aren't working. Not working, guys. We can all agree on this is not working. Whatever you're doing to find Bigfoot obviously isn't working. Why? Because we don't have one. So whatever techniques you're doing, whatever you're trying to do, drones, camping out, whatever, it ain't working. Do something different. So this is part of the problem. And by doing something different, it may mean better quality technology. It may mean better, more search teams. There's lots of things that you do differently. But at the same time, if those don't yield results, at some point you have to say, maybe it ain't there.